Shalom, this is Rabbi Mark Kunis and my Taste of Torah for Parshat Matot Maasey 57:81. When you watch a TV show, each segment begins with a flashback of what went on previously and usually ends with a preview of what will take place in the next episode. This is done so it won't be too hard to remember who is doing what to whom while you're watching. Something like this happens in this week's Torah portion. 2 weeks ago, we read the story of how the Israelites sinned with the women of Moab and their punishment. And this week we learned for the first time and almost in passing that it was Bilam, the pagan prophet, who instigated and plotted to have the Moabites seduce the Jews. Why didn't the Torah mention this before? One commentator suggests that the crime was described first, the punishment mentioned second, and the name of the instigator mentioned last, in order to teach us that even though someone else may have plotted to bring the Jews into sin, nevertheless they were still responsible for what they did. And so the reason why the role of Bilam was left out of the story until later was to make the point that a person is always responsible for what he or she does. You see, our society often excuses those who commit even the most heinous crimes. Today we point to how they were raised or the difficult conditions of their lives. I hope I'm not being too political, but the riotous demonstrations last year at this time, along with the refusal of courts to convict those who willfully looted and destroyed property and hurt others, bear testimony to this. Similarly, people who are addicted to drugs, alcohol, and gambling are now said not to be responsible for what they do. What does the Torah teach us from these passages? It teaches us that if one entraps another into committing a crime, yes, it's a sin, but the victim of the entrapment is still guilty for his crime. A person is always responsible for what he or she does. This is not new. It began all the way with Adam, who, when confronted by God with his sin, pointed to Eve and said, "She made me do it." Eve then pointed to the snake and said, "He made me do it." And thus it has continued ever since. Do you know the story of the boy who gets a bad report card? He comes home and shows it to his parents and he says, "What do you think it is, Mom and Dad, my heredity or my environment?" The answer, of course, is neither. It's us. Adam Muad Olam teaches the Talmud. A person is always responsible for what he or she does. That's the difference between human beings and animals. Animals have drives and instincts within them, and they can't help themselves. But a human being, created in the image of God, has the ability to control, direct, to channel, to sublimate, and unlike animals, to say, "No, this is not right." It's always possible to find reasons and excuses for what we do. We're all geniuses at rationalization. But what makes us human is the ability to say, "Yes, I did it. I was wrong and I am sorry. I will try to change." This is the lesson from the Torah's account of what happened in Moab. First the crime, then the punishment, and finally the instigator, so that we might learn, even if there are temptations, even if there is an instigator, in the end, we are ultimately responsible for what we do and who we become. Have a great Shabbos.